My name is Vanessa Sterling, and I am 36 years old. Last November, my mother called me 2 weeks before Thanksgiving and said, "Vanessa, sweetie, we're going to have to skip you this year. Tyler's new in-laws are coming, and we just don't have enough room at the dining table for everyone." I listened to her make excuses for 5 full minutes, my phone pressed to my ear, while standing in my home office staring at a PDF on my dual monitors. It was the annual lease renewal agreement for the 3-bedroom Craftsman house in Oak Ridge, Illinois. The exact house my parents had lived in for 22 years, and the house my mother was currently standing in while telling me I wasn't welcome. The lease renewal letter was already sitting in my inbox, and it only needed one signature to end. Before we get into the full story, please take a second to like and subscribe if this story resonates with you. And drop your city and local time in the comments below. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to 2018, to a dimly lit diner on Route 14, and the night my parents begged me to save them from sleeping in a motel. Growing up, there were 2 children in the Sterling household, me and my younger brother, Tyler. Tyler was 4 years younger, born with a charismatic smile, an easy laugh, and an absolute inability to accept responsibility for a single thing in his life. My parents, Arthur and Alina Sterling, didn't just love Tyler, they worshipped him. If Tyler got a C in school, the teacher was biased. If Tyler crashed his first car, the road conditions were hazardous. If Tyler lost a job, the boss was threatened by his talent. I was the exact opposite. I was the reliable daughter, the one who studied late into the night, paid her own way through state university by working night shifts as a data analyst, and quietly built a career in corporate logistics. My parents treated my accomplishments like expected chores, while Tyler's bare minimum efforts were celebrated with champagne toasts and family dinners. When I bought my first condo at 27, my dad glanced around the living room and said, "It's a bit small, isn't it? Tyler says he's looking at loft apartments downtown." Tyler was unemployed at the time and living in their basement, but in my father's mind, Tyler's hypothetical loft was already superior to my actual brick-and-mortar property. I learned to live with the imbalance. I built my life brick by brick, dollar by dollar. By 34, I was a senior operations manager making a very comfortable 6-figure salary, investing wisely in local real estate, and keeping my personal finances entirely private from my family. Then came the spring of 2018. My parents had been renting the same Craftsman house on Birch Street for over a decade. Their landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, decided to sell the property to fund his retirement. He offered my parents first right of refusal, but they didn't have a down payment. They didn't even have a savings account. My father had spent years making poor impulse investments, and my mother spent whatever was left keeping Tyler afloat during his various entrepreneurial phases. Mr. Henderson put the house on the market. A real estate investment firm placed a cash offer, intending to evict my parents, renovate the house, and flip it for double the value. My mother called me in tears from that diner on Route 14. "Vanessa, they're taking the house," she sobbed into the receiver. "We're going to be homeless. Your father's back is terrible, and Tyler is just getting his life together. We have nowhere to go." I drove out to meet them that night. Sitting in a vinyl booth under flickering fluorescent lights, my father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. He held his hands in his lap, refused to make eye contact, and let my mother do the begging. "We need $50,000 for a down payment," Mom said, her eyes swollen. "We can get a mortgage if we just have the down payment." I knew my father's credit score. I knew their combined income. Even with $50,000, no bank was going to approve them for a mortgage without predatory interest rates that would drown them in 6 months. So I made a decision. I contacted Mr. Henderson directly the next morning. I had the cash liquid in my investment portfolio. I bought the house outright for $240,000. I paid off the title, covered the closing costs, and placed the property inside an anonymous limited liability company I had formed for my real estate holdings, Oak Ridge Crest Properties, LLC. I hired a local property management company, a small firm called Vance and Associates, to handle the paperwork. I set up a formal lease agreement for my parents. I fixed the rent at $900 a month, less than half the fair market rate for the area, just enough to cover the property taxes, home insurance, and a small maintenance fund. I made one absolute, non-negotiable rule with the property manager, a sharp woman named Sarah Vance. My name was never to appear on a single document sent to the house. As far as my parents knew, a nameless corporate investor had purchased the property from Mr. Henderson and agreed to keep them on as long-term tenants. Why didn't I tell them? Because I knew my family. If Arthur and Alina Sterling knew I owned the house, the $900 a month rent would instantly become zero. They would demand I deed the house to Tyler. They would treat my property like a family birthright rather than a massive financial lifeline extended by the daughter they constantly overlooked. For 6 years, my parents lived in that house. Whenever a pipe burst or the roof leaked, they called Vance and Associates. Sarah handled the repairs, billed my LLC, and I paid the contractors from my corporate account. My parents paid their $900 a month, complained constantly about the faceless landlord who wouldn't upgrade their granite countertops, and I stayed silent. I didn't need their gratitude. I just wanted my parents to have a roof over their heads. Then came 2026, and the arrival of Chloe. Tyler met Chloe in late 2025. Chloe was the daughter of a wealthy local executive who owned a chain of car dealerships across the state. For the first time in his 32 years of life, Tyler had landed someone with money and status. My parents were beside themselves with excitement. They treated Chloe like visiting royalty. Tyler was suddenly dressing in tailored suits he couldn't afford, driving a leased luxury sedan, and talking down to everyone around him. In March of 2026, Tyler and Chloe got engaged. My parents immediately volunteered to host the rehearsal dinner and the family holiday gatherings, desperate to prove to Chloe's prominent family that the Sterlings were people of means and sophistication. Which brings us to the second week of November, 2026. I was sitting in my office when my phone rang. My mother's caller ID popped up. I answered, expecting the usual brief update or a request for me to bring a specific side dish for Thanksgiving dinner. "Vanessa, sweetie," my mother started, her voice light, airy, and entirely insincere. "I'm so glad I caught you. We've been looking at the calendar for Thanksgiving, and things are just so chaotic." "Hi, Mom," I said, putting my headset on and continuing to review my quarterly logistics reports. "Do you need me to bring the wine again this year? Or the pies?" "Well, that's actually what I'm calling about," she said, letting out a small, forced laugh. "You see, Tyler and Chloe are bringing her parents, Richard and Evelyn, and Chloe's brother and his wife are coming up from Chicago, too." "Okay," I said, pausing my cursor. "That sounds like a full house." It really is," Mom continued, her tone shifting into a practiced, defensive rhythm. "And the dining room in this house is just so small, Vanessa. We can only fit 8 people comfortably around the grand table. With your father and me, Tyler, Chloe, her parents, and her brother's family. Well, we're out of seats." I froze. "Mom, we fit 12 people in that dining room before. We just put the folding table at the end." "Oh, goodness, no," Mom scoffed, as if the idea offended her deeply. "We can't put folding tables out for Richard and Evelyn, Vanessa. They're used to the country club. It looks so tacky. So we talked it over with Tyler, and we just think it's best if you don't come this year." The silence on my end of the line was absolute. "Vanessa, are you there? You're uninviting me from Thanksgiving," I asked, my voice flat, almost devoid of emotion because the shock was so dense. "We're not uninviting you, sweetie. We're just postponing our celebration with you," Mom said smoothly. "We can do something small, just the 3 of us, the week after. You understand, don't you? Tyler is trying to make a good impression on his future in-laws. This marriage is huge for his career. We all need to make sacrifices for the family." "I have to make a sacrifice," I corrected quietly, "so Tyler can impress his girlfriend's father." "Don't be dramatic, Vanessa." My mother's voice hardened instantly, the sweet facade dropping. "You've always been so self-sufficient. You don't need the family gatherings the way Tyler does. You're fine on your own. Besides, it's just one dinner. Don't ruin this for your brother." "I see," I said. Good, I knew you'd understand, she rushed to say, eager to end the call before her guilt caught up with her. We'll talk after the holiday, okay? Love you. The line went dead. I sat in my leather chair for a long time. The office was quiet, except for the low hum of my computer tower. You're fine on your own. 4 words my mother had used my entire life to justify throwing me under the bus whenever Tyler wanted the lane. I was self-sufficient, so I didn't need attention. I was strong, so I didn't need support. I was rich in capability, so I could afford to be bankrupt in their affection. My eyes drifted to my secondary monitor. Open on the screen was an email from Sarah Vance at Vance & Associates, sent 2 days prior. Subject: Annual lease renewal, 1142 Birch Street, Oak Ridge. Attachment: Lease extension 2026-2027, PDF *. The 6-year lease term I had granted my parents was expiring on December 31st, 2026. The property management company needed my authorization as the managing member of Oak Ridge Crest Properties, LLC, to auto-renew their $900 a month lease for another year. Below the lease renewal, Sarah had attached a formal request my father had submitted to the management office the week before. I opened my father's request letter. In it, my dad was asking the landlord to spend $18,000 to remodel the kitchen, expand the dining room by knocking out a non-load-bearing wall, and install custom hardwood flooring before December 15th, so the house would look presentable for an upcoming high-profile family wedding. He had added a note at the bottom. If these upgrades are not made, we may be forced to look for housing elsewhere that properly reflects our family's standards. He was posturing to a corporate landlord he thought he could bully. He had no idea he was writing to the daughter he had just barred from his dining table. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Now I want to ask you a question right here. If you had spent 6 years secretly protecting your parents, paying for their home, and charging them half-price rent, only to be thrown away the second a wealthier family walked through the door, what would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. I read through them, and I really want to know if I went too far. Let's keep going, because what happened next was a lesson in cold, hard reality. I called Sarah Vance at Vance & Associates. Sarah, I said, my voice completely steady. I'm looking at the lease renewal for 1142 Birch Street. Hi, Vanessa, Sarah answered briskly. Yes, we're ready to send out the extension paperwork to Mr. and Mrs. Sterling whenever you approve it. Also, did you see your father's request for the kitchen expansion? I was going to send a standard rejection letter, but I wanted to clear it with you first. Don't send the rejection letter, I said, and do not send the lease renewal. Sarah paused. Excuse me. I am declining the lease renewal, I said, looking out my office window at the gray November sky. As of December 31st, 2026, Oak Ridge Crest Properties LLC is terminating the tenancy at 1142 Birch Street. I want a formal notice to vacate issued immediately, in accordance with Illinois state law, giving them 30 days to clear the property. There was a long silence on the line. Sarah knew I was Arthur and Aliner's daughter. She was the only person outside my attorney who knew the ownership structure. Vanessa, are you sure about this? Sarah asked carefully. Where are they going to go? The rental market in Oak Ridge right now is brutal. A 3-bedroom home in that neighborhood is renting for $2,400 a month minimum. They want a home that properly reflects their family's standards, I replied, reading my father's words verbatim off the screen. They can find one on the open market. Issue the notice to vacate, Sarah. Serve it in person on Friday morning. Friday, Sarah asked. That's the day after Thanksgiving. I know, I said. They want to host a high-profile dinner on Thursday. Let them enjoy their dinner. Thanksgiving Day arrived. I didn't stay home and cry. I booked a day pass at a high-end spa downtown, got a facial, enjoyed a quiet 3-course lunch at a French bistro, and spent the evening curled up on my couch with my golden retriever, a glass of Cabernet, and a good book. For the first time in my adult life. Thanksgiving was completely stress-free. Meanwhile, 40 miles away on Birch Street, The grand show was underway. I know what happened because my cousin Aunt Ruth, my father's younger sister, and the only person in the family who saw through Tyler's nonsense, was secretly texting me from the bathroom during the dinner. Ruth, your mom took down all your childhood photos in the hallway, replaced them with pictures of Tyler and Chloe. Ruth, Chloe's dad is talking about his golf handicap. Your father is pretending he owns a manufacturing business instead of managing a warehouse floor. It's painful to watch. Ruth, where are you, Vanessa? Your mom told everyone you had a corporate retreat in New York. I texted Ruth back, I'm at home. Enjoy the turkey, Aunt Ruth. The show starts tomorrow. Friday morning, 9:00 a.m. The air in Oak Ridge was crisp and freezing. My parents were likely still in their robes, drinking coffee, cleaning up the crystal glasses from the night before, and congratulating themselves on a successful evening of social climbing. At 9:15 a.m., a professional process server hired by Vance and Associates walked up the paved walkway of 1142 Birch Street, rang the doorbell, and handed my father a thick manila envelope. At 9:45 a.m., my phone began to ring. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Then Tyler called. I declined it. Finally, at 10:00 a.m., my mother called for the fourth time. I picked up, setting the phone on speaker while I casually folded my laundry. Vanessa, my mother shrieked into the speaker, her voice bordering on full-blown hysteria. You need to call a lawyer right now. Something terrible has happened. Good morning, Mom, I said smoothly. What's wrong? Some monster just served your father with an eviction notice, she cried. A notice to vacate. They're telling us we have to be out of the house by December 31st, right after Christmas, in 30 days. What? I said, keeping my tone perfectly mild. Why? It's that greedy landlord. My father's voice boomed in the background, shouting over my mother's shoulder. We asked for a simple kitchen upgrade, something any decent property owner would provide for long-term tenants, and the bastards are kicking us out instead. They're terminating the lease. Arthur, calm down, Mom yelled back at him before returning to the phone. Vanessa, you know people in town. You work in corporate logistics. Can you find out who runs Oak Ridge Crest Properties LLC? We need to fight this in court. We've lived here for 22 years. Mom, you don't own the house, I reminded her gently. You rent it, and if the lease is expiring, the owner has every legal right not to renew it. But it's our asterisk home, she wailed. Tyler and Chloe's wedding is in 6 months. Where are we supposed to host the engagement brunch? Where are we supposed to live? Rent in this town is astronomical. The property manager told your father that 3-bedroom houses are going for $2,500 a month now. We can't afford that. Well, I said, folding a bath towel with precise alignment. Tyler's future father-in-law owns 5 car dealerships, doesn't he? Surely he can help you out. Or Tyler can step up and support his family. He's doing so well now, right? A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the line. Vanessa, my mother's voice dropped, turning sharp and accusatory. Why are you talking like that? Your brother is saving for a house of his own. He can't afford to pay our rent. You're the one with the high salary. You need to help us find a place or loan us the money to fight this eviction. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, letting out a soft sigh. I'm just so self-sufficient, remember. I'm fine on my own. And since I wasn't part of the family dynamic for Thanksgiving, I don't really see why I should be part of the family financial crisis on Friday. Are you holding a grudge over asterisk dinner? My father roared, grabbing the phone from my mother. We uninvited you from one meal because we had important guests, and you're throwing a tantrum while your mother is crying. I'm not throwing a tantrum, Dad, I said, my voice turning as cold as the glass against my window. I'm stating a fact. You built a world that revolves entirely around Tyler and what he needs. You wanted to play the wealthy, refined patriarch in front of Chloe's parents. Now you get to handle real-world problems like an adult. You selfish, heartless little. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up the phone. Over the next 72 hours, the Sterling family went into absolute meltdown. My father hired a local legal aid attorney to challenge the notice to vacate. The attorney pulled the public land records for 1142 Birch Street to review the corporate ownership of Oak Ridge Crest Properties, LLC. Because my attorney had filed the corporate structure under Illinois State Registry, the managing member was publicly listed. On Tuesday afternoon, December 1st, my father received the corporate disclosure document from his attorney. 10 minutes later, my phone didn't ring. My front doorbell did. I looked through my smart doorbell camera. Standing on my porch in the freezing December rain were my mother, my father, and Tyler. My father was holding the legal disclosure paper in his hand, his face bright red, his jaw working as if he were trying to chew glass. I unlocked the front door and opened it, standing calmly in the warm doorway wearing my cashmere sweater, holding a steaming cup of tea. "Vanessa," my father spat out, holding the paper up to my face. "What is this?" I looked at the document. Oak Ridge Crest Properties, LLC managing member, Vanessa A. Sterling. "It's a corporate filing, Dad," I said comfortably. "You've seen them before." You own the house," my mother whispered, her eyes wide with a horrific, staggering realization. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "You bought the house from Mr. Henderson." 6 years ago, I replied. "When you sat in the diner on Route 14 and cried that you were going to be homeless. I paid $240,000 in cash. I saved you from a motel." Tyler stepped forward, his face contorted in disbelief. "Wait, you've been our landlord this whole time. You've been taking Mom and Dad's rent every month." "I charged them $900 a month, Tyler," I snapped, glaring directly at my brother. "Fair market rent on that street in 2018 was $1,500. Right now, it's $2,400. I subsidized their lives for 6 years to the tune of over $60,000 out of my own pocket. I paid for the roof repairs. I paid for the tax assessments. I paid for the property insurance." My mother took a step into the doorway, her hands reaching out toward me, her eyes filled with tears. "Vanessa, sweetie, oh my God, you saved us. You saved our home." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because if I told you," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "Dad would have demanded I put Tyler's name on the deed. You would have stopped paying rent entirely. And you would have treated my multi-$100,000 gift like something you were entitled to, while continuing to treat me like an afterthought." My father stood frozen. The proud, arrogant man who had spent 30 years belittling my hard work was staring at the daughter who had secretly paid for his roof every night he slept. "Vanessa," Dad's voice trembled, all the anger suddenly draining out of him, replaced by a desperate, panicking dread. You can't evict us. We're your parents. We made a mistake about Thanksgiving. We were stressed about Tyler's in-laws. We should have put out the folding table. We should have made room for you." "You didn't lack room at the table, Dad," I said softly, the truth finally laid completely bare between us. "You lacked respect for your daughter. You erased me from the dinner program. You took down my photos in the hallway. You treated me like dirt because you thought I was useless compared to Tyler's fake success." "I'm your brother, Vanessa," Tyler yelled, trying to posture. "You're ruining my life. Chloe's parents are coming back for Christmas. How is it going to look if my parents are packing boxes into a U-Haul on New Year's Eve?" I looked at Tyler, really looked at him. The custom coat, the gelled hair, the entitlement radiating off him in waves. "You have 30 days, Tyler," I said. "Maybe you can take some of that money you're using to lease your Audi and help Mom and Dad pay security deposits on an apartment." "Vanessa, please," my mother sobbed, grabbing the frame of the door. "Please don't do this to us. It's Christmas. Where are we going to go?" "You have 30 days to find an apartment that properly reflects your family's standards," I said, quoting my father's letter back to him one last time. "The notice to vacate stands. You will be out by December 31st. I stepped back and closed the door. My father pounded on the wood for 5 minutes. Tyler shouted threats about suing me. My mother wept. I walked back into my kitchen, set my tea on the counter, and called the local police non-emergency line to report 3 individuals trespassing on my private property. By the time the squad car pulled up the driveway, my family had finally gotten into Tyler's car and driven away. They didn't fight the eviction in court. Their legal aid attorney told them they didn't have a leg to stand on. The lease was legally binding, the non-renewal was properly served under state statutes, and the landlord, regardless of blood relation, was under no legal obligation to house adult tenants. During the month of December, the family group chats blew up. Uncles, aunts, and cousins from 3 states away began calling me heartless, cruel, and a monster for evicting my elderly parents during the holidays. I handled it with simple efficiency. I created a mass email. I attached the diner story from 2018, the deed of purchase showing I paid $240,000 to save them, the records showing I charged them half-market rent for 6 years, my father's arrogant demand letter for an $18,000 kitchen upgrade, and the text messages from Aunt Ruth showing my mother uninviting me from Thanksgiving to make room for strangers. I sent it to every single family member who had texted me. The flying monkeys went dead silent. 3 cousins sent me private apologies. My Aunt Ruth called me on Christmas Eve and said, "Vanessa, it's the most beautiful piece of justice I've seen in my 60 years on this earth. Come over for dinner." On December 31st, 2026, my parents officially handed the keys back to Sarah Vance at Vance and Associates. They moved into a 2-bedroom basement apartment on the south side of town, the only thing they could afford on my father's fixed income and my mother's part-time wages. Tyler didn't contribute a single dollar to their security deposit. In fact, when Chloe's parents found out about the eviction, and the fact that Tyler's family had been lying about their financial status and living in a house owned by the sister they had banished, Chloe's father called off the engagement. He reportedly told Chloe that he couldn't allow her to marry into a family that treated their own blood with such calculated deceit. Tyler moved back into my parents' basement apartment in January of 2027. He's currently working as a barista and driving a 10-year-old hatchback after his Audi lease was repossessed. As for me, I spent January renovating 1142 Birch Street. I put in new hardwood floors, painted the exterior a warm, inviting cream, and put it on the market with a premier management firm. It is currently rented to a lovely young family with 2 little girls for $2,600 a month. I spent this past Thanksgiving at Aunt Ruth's house. We sat around a long, crowded table, extended by 2 rickety wooden folding chairs at the end. I sat in one of those folding chairs, eating turkey, laughing until my ribs ached, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not for what I could give them. My parents tried to text me on my birthday last month. They sent a short message, "We miss you, Vanessa. We hope we can talk soon." I didn't block them. I didn't reply. I just left the message sitting in my inbox, right next to the property deed that proved I had done everything I could for them, until they decided I wasn't worth a seat at the table. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. The truth always has a way of showing up, even if it takes 6 years and a lease renewal to find its way home. See you next time.